Welcome to ancient Egypt, 14th century BC. Meet Amenhotep IV, a young pharaoh with big plans and an even bigger ego. He's about to do something nobody in Egypt asked for: cancel the old gods, invent a new one, and move the entire capital city into the middle of nowhere. What could possibly go wrong? Amenhotep IV was born as the second son of Pharaoh Amenhotep III and his great royal wife, Queen Tiye, around 1350 BCE. He likely grew up in Thebes amid luxury, education, and a whole bunch of gods. By the time he came to the throne, around 1353 BCE, Egypt was rich and powerful, and the cult of Amun, the chief deity, was even richer. In fact, his very name, Amenhotep, meant Amun is satisfied, which is hilariously ironic considering what he'd do later. When Amenhotep IV took power, he had big shoes to fill. Dad Amenhotep III had ruled 38 years of prosperity, building huge temples and statues, the expectation Junior would carry on tradition. And at first it seemed that way. Young Amenhotep IV performed the usual pharaonic duties, made offerings to Amun, and even commissioned art in the classic style. But beneath the surface, our boy Amenhotep had some unconventional ideas. Some hints even came from his dad's time. Amenhotep III had quietly promoted the sun disk Aten. He even named a palace after Aten. By year 4 of his reign, Amenhotep IV decided being ordinary was overrated. Thus begins one of history's wildest rebrands. Spoiler, he's going to change everything, from religion to art to the address of the capital. Buckle up, it's reform time. Amenhotep IV basically said, "All right, folks, new plan, only one god from now on. The rest of your deities, you're fired." In a culture that worshipped a whole pantheon of gods for millennia, this was pure heresy. But being Pharaoh, and presumably thinking he was the real chosen one, he went for it. He promoted the Aten, the sun disk, as the sole supreme deity. In year 5, he even changed his name to Akhenaten, meaning effective for Aten, ditching the old name that praised Amun. Akhenaten's new religion was basically monotheism, or at least monopolytheism. Scholars debate the fine print, monotheism, henotheism, whatever, but what's crystal clear is that Aten became the state's one and only VIP god. The Aten was depicted as a sun disk whose rays ended in little hands, reaching out to bless the royal family. Imagine the sun giving out free high fives. Akhenaten cast himself as the sole intermediary between Aten, and he didn't stop there. Akhenaten launched a campaign of religious smackdown against the traditional gods. He ordered agents to literally chisel out the names of certain deities, especially Amun, from monuments and inscriptions across Egypt. Temples of other gods were shuttered by around his 9th year. This was huge. These temples weren't just religious centers, they were economic hubs. Shutting them down rocked Egyptian society. Priests of Amun, the older Egyptians were bewildered. Traditionally, they were cool with many gods. More gods meant more festivals. They'd happily add a new god to the pantheon, but abolishing all the old ones? Unheard of. Akhenaten's Aten cult was exclusive, basically a royal family religion. To the average Joe, or rather average Nat, this probably felt like the pharaoh had lost his mind in the desert sun. Despite resistance, Akhenaten was all in. He and his famous queen Nefertiti became the high priest and priestess of Aten. The Aten was often drawn with its rays ending in hands, offering Ankh, life symbols, to the king and queen. It's good to be the pharaoh when even the sun's rays are literally handing you life. Akhenaten's devotion was so intense that later generations called him the heretic king, accusing him of turning Egypt upside down. But we're not there yet. Akhenaten didn't just stop at religious overhaul. Oh no, he had to remix Egyptian art and culture too. Remember how pharaohs were always depicted as buff, perfectly proportioned demigods? Yeah, Akhenaten said, nah. Let's try something weird. Under his rule, Egyptian art took a hard left turn into what we now call the Amarna style. In the early years, he followed the standard art style of his ancestors, but as Atenism took hold, art got funky. Artists started portraying the royal family with elongated heads, slender necks, and spindly limbs. Akhenaten is shown with a potbelly, wide hips, and thick thighs, sometimes looking almost androgynous, so much that in some carvings, you need a second glance to tell if it's him or Nefertiti. His face in sculptures has a long nose, full lips, and narrow squinting eyes. Basically, he went from Marvel superhero physique to, well, even Nefertiti and the daughters got the elongation treatment. Royal family scenes became intimate and casual. The king and queen are depicted playing with their kids under the sun's rays. Akhenaten's regime clearly wanted to humanize the royals. Culturally, other changes were afoot. Traditional court poetry and inscriptions gave way to hymns to Aten, including the famous Great Hymn to the Aten, attributed to Akhenaten himself, basically a long love poem to the sun. The language became more effusive and personal. Even how hieroglyphs were written changed slightly. For example, Akhenaten had the word for mother and father combined to perhaps reflect Aten's genderless nature, talk about proto-progressive. Clearly, Akhenaten wasn't content being a run-of-the-mill pharaoh. He had to leave his artistic stamp literally in stone. Some Egyptians might have thought the world turned upside down. The statues looked funky, the religion's unrecognizable. What's next? How about moving the capital city for good measure?